We good? Awesome. Okay, we're going to jump in. That cool?
Sounds good.
Pat Lynch, such an honor and a great opportunity to get to sit down and connect with you. Thanks for taking the time to connect. So for those of you that don't know, Pat is the managing director for CBRE's Data Center Solutions Group. And they do data center work in a number of different facets for companies all across the world. So very excited that you're here and getting to talk with you about the space has been, something that's been on my list for a long time. So one of the things I would love to talk to you about is, and an interesting part in the industry is the fact that you get to sit down with different clients of all different sizes and companies and organizations that are evaluating their IT infrastructure and the different ways that they approach the market. And so since you've been at CBRE, which might have been, 2011, that you 2012?
6 years, yeah,
okay.
a little over 6 years.
That you came on. I'd love to hear about how that view has changed, how you're seeing users approach the market differently today than they did when you first started.
That's great. Well, thanks for having me, David. The hybrid IT is probably the way I would summarize what we're seeing. So 6 years ago, when you and I were working together, which was a great time, a lot of conversations about space and power.
Yeah.
Network was still important, but it was a secondary issue. It was just assumed network could get there. Flash forward to today with cloud computing and consulting and network becoming very important again, much like it is, in 1998 when I was with Level 3 and built their sites out all around the globe. So I think the combination of cloud, enterprise IT, network interconnection, all of that coming together in a world where almost every client we see has that type of a need. Size and scale and reach varies by client, but that's probably the piece that is kind of connecting everything across all the industries with all of the clients that we see.
Yeah, and as you work with, obviously the CBRE team is large and in markets across the U.S. and other countries as well. But if you think of the U.S. As kind of a base case here, where are you seeing from a growth perspective markets? What markets are you seeing, users' eye as attractive, and where you're seeing growth take place?
So Northern Virginia, to state the obvious, continues to be kind of ground zero, if you will, for demand. And short window looking out into the future, nothing's going to change that.
And why do you think that's been such the case with Northern Virginia?
I think you've got a kind of a perfect storm of undersea cables, the original interconnection, relatively low cost. When you think about the East Coast and the competitive markets over there, everything adds up to make Northern Virginia very competitive. And now, Northern Virginia potentially is broadening when you look at what's happening in Richmond and some of the surrounding areas. So that first and foremost is far and away the most demand. In our research report, which is going to come out here in the next week or two, will indicate that. Dallas is emerging, as you well know, David. Silicon Valley continues to be strong.
Yeah.
Right? So we are watching Hillsborough and Reno and all of the activity that's happening there. But yet, when you talk to our team in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, they're seeing still a significant amount of demand around there. Chicago remains strong, and Atlanta, with a lot of announcements on new space, will be an interesting one to watch. My colleague in Atlanta refers to Atlanta as Southern Ashburn, so that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I believe the Atlanta growth, I would say, snuck up on us a little bit, not in the sense that it's not a market where that can't happen, but for a long time, probably a 5 to 7 year period, it was business as usual there, in my opinion, with the amount of supply that was there and the amount of demand. And over the last year, with the announcements that have been made, that market is going to transform in a major way over the next 12 to 24 months with the deliveries that are coming online, as well as I do think there is if you want to be on the East Coast and Northern Virginia isn't necessarily where you want to be, Atlanta is probably the second best option, especially from a cost perspective.
You bet.
Yeah.
Well, the TCO models, as you well know, Atlanta is very competitive on a national basis, and that's always been the case. So when you add more product and quality product with quality providers, it's only going to increase the demand.
Yeah.
I think the other piece that's impacting that is some of the undersea cables, coming into Jacksonville and in that region, which are feeding demand into Atlanta as well as it disperses throughout the country. So yeah, I feel very good about Atlanta and its future.
How has the hyperscale development, from your perspective, really impacted the industry? What have you seen some of the impacts be from a supply perspective as investors look at the space, as data center owners develop facilities and markets? How have you seen that impact the way they do their business?
So I think to date it's been incredibly beneficial to the industry, right? And while they've built their own facilities, which people watch and get a lot of attention, they've also absorbed a significant amount of co-location space across the major markets. And at least short-term view, we don't see that changing. We see that same dynamics happening, and we also see them building at massive scales, but not typically in strong co-location markets. So you think places like Omaha or Des Moines or the places that maybe Columbus, Ohio. So I think that'll continue, and I also think there's a next layer down of maybe not quite hyperscale, but still large-scale cloud deployers that are just now starting to build out. And I suspect much of that build-out will be done in wholesale co-location space. So I'm still relatively optimistic that we've got some runway left, and I think the space that will be one of the questions I get asked from some of our investor clients, investors in the space, is, well, how does this play out? What space is at risk? And I think, as I look at it, David, there's still a significant amount of IT data center space sitting in multi-tenant office buildings that has no reason to be there. We have a number of corporate clients that are still operating, in some cases, very old, antiquated data centers that are very inefficient. That type of supply needs to go away before I believe you're going to start seeing impacts to some of the quality wholesale colo in these major markets.
Yeah, that's one of the thoughts that continually comes back to me as it relates to, I think it's easy for our industry because there is so much cloud talk that organizations have already moved there and their infrastructure is growing in that way. And I don't necessarily think that the industry is as far along as sometimes we give it credit from a migration standpoint from just existing IT space within their premises into co-location or cloud. How do you, I think one thing that's interesting about companies like a CBRE is the international impact that, you will have and the way you can service clients on an international basis. How do you view that as far as U.S. companies looking internationally? And is that something that you all are working with your clients on as far as growing their business internationally?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, I love my job, right? I work for a great company with a global reach, and as a management employee, I get to see lots of different companies from many different industries look at this network and data center world and how they're going to address it in an incredibly dynamic time. So I have to pinch myself sometimes, but I'm very fortunate in that regard. And on the international side, if you think we're in the second inning maybe in North America, we're bottom of the first in EMEA, in my opinion, and Asia Pacific. We're singing the national anthem. So I obviously a sports guy, as you know. So I think there's so much for this yet to evolve, and the hyperscale world is. We use that term a lot, but that's only a component of the user base. We touched on hybrid IT. Maybe I'll jump back to that. I mean, one of the things that we're watching very closely, and we're seeing our clients adapt, is a lot of the wholesale providers are starting to do this, which is this cloud on-ramp. Right? So let me take space in a wholesale world, but I want the flexibility of my contract to migrate in and out of cloud services. And I think that has we're seeing that across our client base to be, even if they don't adopt it day one, the potential to move that and move those services in and out of cloud and traditional colo. I think that's going to be a real differentiator going forward.
That's good. So as you work with organizations, how have you seen companies make the best decisions? So, I think one of the challenges companies have when they are working through a consolidation project or, an IT infrastructure project, they struggle with having the right people on the team to make the best decision. And so I think for users that are watching, for if your company, is in a project or working through that, who needs to be involved to basically, number one, make the best decision, number two, get it done?
Correct. So I'll keep the names out to protect the guilty.
Yeah.
But successful projects for us, and again, getting to see a large variety, David, it's when the real estate team and the IT team in general are aligned, and oftentimes procurement has a role in there.
Yeah.
But when they're at the table talking as a uniform group with a senior level sponsor, we have great success.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, one or two of those groups are missing, and there's not a senior level sponsor, and we can spin a lot of cycles.
Yep.
And oftentimes, not make the most optimal decisions, or at least not get there until a much longer period.
Yeah.
So I think alignment within a company and the key decision makers is absolutely critical, whether we're discussing a sale leaseback of a data center, if we're talking about a co-location deployment, or if we're talking about an overriding IT strategy. Engagement of those key stakeholders collectively is absolutely key.
And I think having that or understanding that process before projects begin, and understanding, hey, how are we going to get this approved? Who needs to be involved to do that? I think it's really important. Especially as these projects, the timeline continues to condense and get smaller, and the expectations are higher that the deal will get done.
I agree. I think the one caveat though is we also have success when we get engaged early and can be a part of that solution, rather than have the client, we're going to go do this. And we do that. We do that very well, but it's
so
a very
that you can help think through
absolutely and options, right? And when we work on, as an example, sale partial leasebacks, if we can get engaged early and have those conversations with the client about terms and rental rates and how you would structure a particular leaseback component of that.
Yes.
There's a lot of things we're doing because we're so involved in so many of those that can create value for the client.
Sure.
Rather than, a lot of our corporate clients may never deal with that again in their career.
Yep.
The team that I lead, we deal with that every day.
Yeah, I was going to say the benefit, I guess, would be the collective feedback and expertise that your team has from doing multiple projects like that in multiple markets at different sizes. That makes sense. So think about just the industry moving forward, what you're excited about. What are some key trends that you feel like will guide the kind of evolution of the data center industry moving forward?
So definitely edge computing.
Okay.
Right. I think we're fortunate to be working with some transportation companies and cutting edge of what edge computing means and driverless cars.
Yes.
And, it's exciting and fascinating to me to even fathom where this may all go. So that's definitely a component that will drive IT and data center demand to much, much smaller markets.
Yep.
And we're seeing that evolve already with certain markets and certain industries. So that's going to be really exciting. The network component, I touched on this earlier. Being an old network guy, network at one point was absolutely key to first generation data center space. Then we kind of migrated out, and now it's definitely coming back in. So I think the importance and the criticality of network, what's going to happen with 5G.
Yes.
And you combine that with edge. I'm not smart enough to know what that all means, but I'm hoping to be around for a while to see how that all comes together.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be fascinating, and I think we're really, really early stages of that.
Yeah, the edge discussion I think is fascinating, really interesting. I do think too, in fact, I saw some of the companies that are developing that technology recently announce what markets they were going to push that out to first as test markets, which I think that will be a really good story to watch and to see. Some of those are higher population markets, which I think, the collective thought is that the greater the population, depending on technologies like autonomous driving and the things, or autonomous cars, like the things that you mentioned, could create a whole new world of IT infrastructure that the market is still diving into a bit. So I think that's going to be awesome to watch, and I think for people that have been in the space a long time, I mean, you have been in it a little longer than I have.
Very nicely said.
But I think that's a really interesting thing to watch, and I think that will...
Smart cities.
Yes.
I mean, somehow that's going to tie into this as well, right?
Yes.
And in the case of smart cities, you may see just the opposite, and that emerging cities with a smaller population, it might be a little easier to adapt some of those potential
Yes.
build-outs into a smaller
Yes.
location than say a Manhattan.
Yeah, no, you bet. Okay, I want to switch gears for a second, and I want to talk about Nebraska football and the fact that
Scott Frost,
yeah.
baby.
So we haven't even talked about this, but Scott Frost, new coach, had a great season last year, turned the team around. But as a proud Nebraska Husker fan, what are your thoughts on the new coach and the team moving forward?
It's like the data center space. Nothing but optimism, David. Nothing but optimism
Yeah.
and in a good future. So,
That's great.
Yeah, Husker Nation is very excited to
There you go.
have the home guy back home.
Love it. Well, thank you for coming in and doing this. I really appreciate it. If you want to find out more about CBRE's Data Center Solutions Group, you can get on their website to do that. This is Pat Lynch, again, Managing Director for CBRE's Data Center Solutions Group. Pat, thank you.
Thanks,
Loved getting to talk to you and look forward to what the industry is going to do in the future.
My pleasure.
Thanks.